The Train of Bodies. In the movie The Midnight Meat Train, the story follows Leon, a photographer obsessed with capturing the raw truth of New York's streets. The more he tries to photograph violence and strangeness, the more his life starts to revolve around the killer Mahogany, a cold man who eliminates passengers inside subway cars. Leon begins to follow him to understand what's behind that bloody routine, and ends up dragging his girlfriend Maya into a mystery he never should have touched. The truth comes out when the two follow Mahogany to an abandoned station. There, they discover an underground cave inhabited by deformed reptilian creatures that have survived for centuries by devouring human flesh. Mahogany isn't an ordinary psychopath, but the butcher responsible for feeding these creatures so they won't rise to the surface and attack the city. The fight between Leon and Mahogany is brutal, and ends with Leon driving a broken femur into the killer, believing he has finally ended the nightmare. But the train conductor appears to show that it wasn't a victory. He explains that the city depends on this hidden sacrifice, and that someone needs to take over the position left by Mahogany. He rips out Leon's tongue, eats it in front of him, and opens Maya's chest to offer her heart to the creatures, while Leon watches without being able to react. His fate is sealed right there.
Now serve, as we all do, without question.
In the final scene, Leon appears on the midnight train, wearing the former butcher's ring and silently watching the next shipment of bodies. The darkness he sought to capture ends up consuming everything he was. Hell. In the movie Event Horizon, the story follows a rescue crew sent to investigate a ship that disappeared. Led by Captain Miller, they find the Event Horizon abandoned near Neptune, apparently intact, but surrounded by clear signs that something went very wrong. Along with the group is Dr. William Weir, the scientist responsible for creating the ship and the gravity drive that would allow faster than light travel. That engine doesn't work like ordinary technology. It creates a shortcut through space by bending reality. But what Weir never revealed is that this shortcut crossed an unknown dimension. The place the ship went to isn't exactly the classic religious hell, but a reality where pain and violence are the main language. The ship came back carrying that dimension inside it. Over time, the crew begins to suffer violent hallucinations caused by personal traumas that the entity uses to break their minds. Weir, consumed by guilt and direct contact with that dimension, abandons any trace of humanity and starts acting as an emissary of the place the ship went to. Realizing there's no way to escape without destroying everything, Miller decides to sacrifice himself. He faces Weir in a final fight while separating the ship's front section, saving the few survivors. Trapped in the main section of the Event Horizon, Miller detonates explosives and disappears along with Weir when the portal opens again. That way, even though he saved the crew, he will spend eternity in hell. The ship breaks apart and the front section enters hibernation, ensuring the group's survival. Months later, they are found drifting.
They're fine. They're fine. They're with us. They're with us.
The body swap. In the movie The Skeleton Key, we follow Caroline Ellis, a young nurse who agrees to care for Ben Devereaux, a debilitated man living in an old mansion. Little by little, she begins to notice strange behavior from the homeowners, Violet and Luke, and discovers symbols, rituals, and stories linked to hoodoo, an ancient spiritual practice from the region. Even without truly believing in those beliefs, Caroline starts investigating the house's past and convinces herself that Ben is the victim of something supernatural. When she thinks she has finally understood how hoodoo works and believes she's ready to face Violet and Luke, she ends up exactly where they wanted her. The ritual only works because she starts to believe, and the moment the mirror hits her head, the soul swap happens with no chance of return. Mama Cecile's spirit jumps straight into Caroline's young body, while she wakes up trapped in Violet's old, weak body. Luke then reveals the whole truth and admits to being Papa Justify. The two have been repeating this process for decades, always jumping into new bodies. The real Violet and Ben died many years ago, lynched while they were in Cecile's and Justify's bodies. Caroline realizes too late that she fell into her own trap. The brick dust circle she believed was meant to protect against hoodoo was actually an essential part of the ritual. Unable to react, she's forced to drink a potion that leaves her paralyzed and mute. Meanwhile, Mama Cecile in Caroline's body and Papa Justify in Luke's body calmly leave in the ambulance, leaving Caroline trapped in the house, condemned to live in the wrong body forever. Walrus Skin. In the movie Tusk, the plot follows Wallace, an arrogant podcaster who travels looking for bizarre stories to turn into content, but ends up captured by Howard, a lonely man with a dark obsession. Howard says that years earlier he was saved from a shipwreck by a walrus named Mr. Tusk, and that since then he believes the walrus was the only creature that truly loved him. Consumed by this fixation, he decides to recreate the perfect animal using human beings, reshaping body and mind to turn his victims into a living replica. When Wallace wakes up in captivity, he still tries to rationalize things, things, but Howard slowly strips away his humanity. Grotesque surgeries shape his body into that of a walrus, while psychological torture conditions his mind to act like the animal. In the final confrontation, Howard wears his own walrus suit and forces Wallace to fight as if he were truly a marine creature. Wallace ends up reacting exactly as he was trained and impales Howard with the tusks, putting an end to that sick obsession. Even so, the damage is already done. Wallace is found completely transformed and taken to a sanctuary. Trapped in a zoo, Wallace survives in a body that is no longer human, unable to speak or recognize himself. The transformation is complete, but the consciousness still exists.
I love you, Wallace. Don't ever forget that.
The Cursed. In the movie When Evil Lurks, the plot follows Pedro and Jimmy, two brothers who find a man who appears to be possessed by a dark entity. Without following the rules that would prevent contamination, they try to handle everything on their own and end up unleashing evil across the region. From that point on, the plague spreads chaotically, taking people at random and turning each one into a tool of violence. The destruction hits hard at Ruiz's house. After seeing the possessed goat, his wife collapses. Ruiz tries to stop the spread of evil, shoots the animal, and loses control of the situation. The demonic influence takes over everything, and the woman kills him, only to be killed. Shortly after, showing that there's no more logic or cure on their path. When Pedro tries to flee with his family, he discovers that the evil has already taken over the entire town. Every encounter, every noise, and every look shows that the infection is roaming freely. Nothing they do stops the advance of the plague. The most brutal scene happens on the way back home, when Pedro tries to give his son Jair a moment of calm by offering him a cup of ice cream. Jair starts choking. Pedro tries to help and puts his hand in his son's mouth to pull out whatever is blocking his breathing, but what comes out is completely unexpected. Strand after strand of human hair comes out of his throat, long and tangled, along with jewelry, revealing that the ice cream was only hiding something far worse. Horror crashes down on Pedro when he realizes that Jair, already overtaken by possession, devoured his own grandmother. The shock wipes out any remaining hope. Outside the house, Pedro falls into despair, bitter birth. In Splice, the story reaches its breaking point when the creature Dren completes its transformation. What began as a scientific rule-breaking experiment turns into a real nightmare when Dren shifts into a male form and attacks everything around it. After feeding and growing even stronger, it kills Barlow, an executive from the nerd company responsible for overseeing the projects, and Gavin, someone outside the scientific field who ends up caught in the experiment's consequences without any effort, making it clear that no containment would be enough. Elsa and Clive, genetic engineers who worked for the company behind the experiments, try to control the situation, but the lab becomes a hunting ground. Dren looks at Elsa in a way that's no longer innocent. The creature subdues and assaults her, leaving Clive completely desperate when he arrives to save her. He tries to fight Dren with everything he has, but is overpowered and killed right in front of her. Amid tears and shock, Elsa finds a brief moment of advantage and ends up killing Dren, but the relief lasts only seconds. She realizes something is wrong with her own body and soon understands that she has been inseminated. Panic gives way to a kind of hard silence as the company arrives, offering money and protection in exchange for her carrying the pregnancy to term. They want to study every biological compound Dren carried and know the fetus could be worth millions. Even after everything, Elsa accepts the offer and even says,
What's the worst that could happen?
remaining there without knowing what will be born or what will happen to her body. Fatal fall. In life, everything completely falls apart when David, the mission's doctor, realizes there's no longer any way to defeat Calvin, the extraterrestrial organism that at first seemed harmless, but then turned into this.
Go, get out of here.
With a final plan, pulling the creature into his escape capsule with the idea of sacrificing himself while Miranda descends alone back to Earth to warn everyone. On paper it sounded simple, but chaos in space spares no one, and a storm of debris hits everything, sending the capsules in the wrong directions. From that moment on, the movie turns into pure desperation. Miranda's capsule was supposed to be the one that returned safely to Earth, but she completely loses control and flies straight past, heading into the empty void of space with no chance of coming back. David's capsule, on the other hand, crashes into the Pacific Ocean. A group of fishermen find the capsule and move closer. They don't understand English and only hear muffled screams coming from inside. David begs them not to open the hatch, but it's useless. The door is unlocked, and inside they find Calvin wrapped around his body like a living cocoon. The fishermen try to help without realizing they've just released the worst possible threat on Earth. Meanwhile, Miranda floats alone in space with absolutely no hope. The son of evil. Brightburn presents a dark reimagining of the idea of the boy from another world, showing what would happen if a being with extraordinary powers never developed empathy or a moral compass. Instead of becoming a protector, Brandon grows up feeding increasingly violent impulses while his parents try to deny what's right in front of them. By the time the truth can no longer be ignored, terror has already taken over the Breyer family. The final stretch focuses all that horror on Tori, who discovers that the ship that brought him to Earth can hurt hurt her son and decides to use it on him in the barn. Brandon faces Tori, his mother, with a cold stare, showing that she no longer means anything to him because he's been completely taken over by evil. Tori tries to buy a few seconds by speaking softly, trying to reach any trace of humanity that might still be there. When Brandon steps in to hug her, Tori reacts quickly, grabbing a fragment of the ship and trying to stab the boy. Brandon notices the movement before the strike reaches him and effortlessly grabs her hand, turning the attempt at redemption into just another act of desperation. His expression doesn't change. There's no anger, just a cold certainty that Tori has become another obstacle. Brandon lifts her by the arms, bursts through the roof of the barn, and shoots up into the sky with her. The altitude increases and the air thins as Tori doesn't even try to fight back. In a gesture that sums up his cruelty, Brandon simply lets her go. Right after that, a plane crosses Brandon's path, and he destroys the aircraft, causing yet another disaster. Drowned in horror. Funny Games follows George, Anna, and their son Georgie as they arrive at their lakeside vacation home, unaware that they're about to become pieces in a cruel game controlled by two young men named Paul and Peter. The entire story is built to make it clear that nothing the family does will ever be enough to escape, and that becomes even more obvious when we reach Anna Schober's final fate. After hours of humiliation, psychological torture, and the brutal death of her own son, Anna tries everything to survive. She runs down the road barefoot and shaking. When she finally manages to stop a car, the feeling is pure relief, but it doesn't last. The vehicle belongs to Paul and Peter, the same ones who destroyed her family. They drag her back to the house, tie her hands, and place her in front of a new game, where any hope becomes just another excuse for torture. During this game, Anna sees an opening. She runs to the shotgun and shoots Peter with a clean hit. It's a sudden burst of hope, but the movie destroys that feeling without mercy. Paul grabs a remote control, presses a button, and rewinds the scene. The shot never happened. Anna's chance never existed. Soon after, Paul kills George without hesitation, and when morning comes, Anna is taken to the family's boat. On the boat, Paul calmly talks to Peter about made-up stories while holding Anna near the edge. He then simply pushes her, and Anna falls into the water. There are no screams, no rescue, just another death for them.
Ciao, Bella. Why? The deadline was 9, so almost another hour. Well, it's too difficult to tell like this.
Sealed Fate. The Vanishing tells a story that begins as a mysterious disappearance and ends with one of the cruelest fates ever suffered by a protagonist. Rex appears as an ordinary man trying to save his relationship during a trip, until his girlfriend Saskia disappears without a trace at a gas station. From that point on, anxiety takes over everything. He spends years chasing even the smallest clue, always believing that one day he'll find the answer that will give meaning to the suffering he carries, without knowing that everything is being manipulated and observed from a distance by Raymond, Saskia's killer. When Raymond finally shows up saying he'll reveal everything, Rex is already emotionally exhausted. Even realizing he's dealing with someone dangerous, he agrees to follow the man and accepts the macabre offer that's presented to him. During the drive, Raymond coldly explains that there's only one way for Rex to truly understand Saskia's fate. He needs to experience exactly what she went through, and for that, he has to drink a drugged coffee. It's a calculated line of reasoning from someone who sees everything as a scientific experiment. Rex accepts the coffee, believing that any truth is better than eternal doubt, but wakes up completely trapped inside an underground coffin. With no real chance of escape, he realizes he's living the same ending that took Saskia out of the world. As he desperately struggles to breathe, he understands that his intense search was always meaningless because Saskia had been dead all along, and that search led him straight into this trap. Deadly Reflection. The movie Oculus tells the story of Tim and Kaylee Russell, two siblings who grew up marked by a tragedy, having witnessed their father completely lose his sanity, murder their mother, and then take his own life. Years later, Kaylee returns to the old house determined to prove that none of it was a human act. To her, the real culprit was always the antique mirror that was part of the house. Tim, recently released from a mental institution and far more skeptical, tries to stay grounded, believing it's all unresolved trauma. Even so, he stays with his sister as she sets up a system full of cameras and devices meant to capture anything supernatural. The suspended anchor, programmed to destroy the mirror if something goes wrong, becomes Kaylee's biggest ace. The problem is that as the night goes on, the mirror begins to distort their reality. Hallucinations mix with memories and they can no longer tell what's real. In one of those moments, Kaylee sees her mother standing in front of her. Believing she's defending herself from a vision created by the mirror, she attacks the figure with a knife. Soon after, the illusion fades and she realizes that she had actually stabbed Michael Dumont, her fiance, who had come to the house to check if everything was okay with the security system. Tim finally realizes that Kaylee's theory made sense. They try to escape the house but fail and continue to be haunted by visions. Kaylee starts seeing younger versions of herself and believes her mother is trapped inside the mirror, calling for help and pretending to offer a hug. At the same time, Tim is also consumed by hallucinations and can no longer tell reality reality from illusion. Convinced that destroying the mirror is the only way out, Tim activates the anchor without realizing Kaylee is standing right in front of it. The impact kills her instantly. To make things worse, the camera records the scene as if he had committed the crime. When the police arrive, Tim is taken away in handcuffs, fully aware that no one will ever believe the truth, and that the mirror remains free to keep creating new victims. The mysterious box in 7. The tension reaches its breaking point when John Doe leads Mills and Somerset out to the middle of nowhere. His calm demeanor alone already makes everything feel wrong. When a delivery van arrives carrying a mysterious box, the atmosphere instantly changes. Somerset opens the box and is horrified by what he sees inside. It's Tracy's head, Mills's wife. Doe starts talking, explaining that he acted out of envy toward Mills's normal, peaceful life. He also reveals that Tracy was pregnant and that Mills didn't even know. The shock leaves everyone completely shaken. Mills starts to lose control while Doe keeps provoking him, pushing the detective straight toward the abyss he planned from the very beginning. Somerset tries to hold the situation together, begging Mills not to do exactly what Doe wants, since that was the killer's goal, to be killed out of wrath and complete the 7 deadly sins. But the pain overpowers any attempt at reason. Mills pulls the trigger several times and ends up committing the final sin, completing the killer's perfect plan.